Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hello, everybody. I am absolutely delighted to introduce today's guest, Smita Joshi. Smita is an award-winning author, avid yogi and yoga teacher, high performance and transformation coach. She is the author of the Amazon bestseller, Karma and Diamonds trilogy. Inspired by real events from her own life, Karma and Diamonds follows a young woman's gripping journey of self-discovery across continents and lifetimes as she struggles to conquer life's conflicts and unpredictable challenges by listening to the inner voice. Prior to writing the trilogy, in a business career spanning 25 years working with technology giants as well as startups, Smita worked internationally with global leaders of the industry, winning multi-million-dollar contracts, the largest being $1 billion. She was one of the first to bring India's information technology services into the heart of British and European companies. As a TV presenter and for her YouTube channel, the Self-Discovery Channel, Smita, she has interviewed leading politicians, entrepreneurs, and global gurus. She also creates videos on topics of personal development and emotional and spiritual intelligence. Please join me in welcoming Smita Joshi. Welcome, Smita.
Thank you, Tammy. So lovely to be with you.
Really happy to have you here today. So, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning, your formative years. Tell us a little bit about your beginnings and how they may or may not have influenced where you are today.
Thank you. So there are multiple threads that I could pick from, from my sort of beginnings, my little beginnings. But the one that I think is interesting to talk about, because we were just mentioning that before we started our conversation, is the fact that, I was born in India. I was fortunate enough to be born in India. And I was born in a very traditional town. It's where Mahatma Gandhi came from. Ooh. It's where his family was for 200 years. And then my grandfather, my mother's father, a maternal grandfather, and his family also. And, so I had the amazing privilege of being born, and at least for the first 10 years of my life, to absorb all of that culture and that environment, languages. So, by the time I was already 5, I was already speaking Hindi, at least almost 3 languages. Wow. Because we started with Gujarati as a basis, and then Hindi, even when you're in play school, because kids from all over India were there in the school that I went to. And then English was also, it was an English school. So we had kids who came from various places. And by the time I was already 5 to 7 years old, I was speaking 3 languages. And it shapes your thinking in a certain way when you are exposed to that, because language, as I was saying earlier, actually creates worlds. It creates worlds. Without language, we don't have anything. We actually don't have the ability to express consciousness. So that's where I started. And I found that learning to read and write Hindi and Gujarati at a very young age. Actually, I don't remember learning. I don't remember learning to write Hindi and Gujarati. I do remember learning to learning English. And I don't know whether that's just something that I forgot or it was something that was innately there. Why that's important is because as I have grown older, I've explored the idea of who we are as a being, as a human being. Who am I? And it's a very deep question that has taken me all around the world. And if I hadn't learned Hindi and Gujarati in written form, I wouldn't have been able to get directly the ancient text, the Sanskrit, which gives the original essence of what was intended. Because by the time you come into a translation, first of all, you have a perspective of a human being who is interpreting something that they're reading, and you don't have the opportunity then to actually, study it for yourself as is. And so it's been very important. And then when we moved to London when I was 10, then I was exposed to French and German very, very quickly, which I took to like duck to water. And those languages were funny enough in the sense that the structure of those languages somehow, for French for me, is like the Western Hindi, very poetic, very poetic, very lyrical in a sense. And you can get a feel of a romance in there. And German, when I learned German grammar, and as an adult, I learned more about Sanskrit, what I realized was that actually German is literally a copy of the Sanskrit grammar as it was then, transposed onto an Indo-European language. So that's fascinating. And then sometimes, in my business life, I was traveling a lot around Europe, working with Germans and Swiss and Belgians and Dutch and so on. And then I can pick up the roots of words in places, Sanskrit, Greek in Sanskrit, for example, and Latin, so on. So, it's really fascinating when you can actually see the connection between our evolution. So for me, I could talk about n number of things. If anybody has read or will read Karma and Diamonds, the first line of the book, gives a whole other variation on a discussion we could have. But I think this is a more interesting one today.
Well, I can appreciate, though, your exposure to language and the ways in which you're describing it, both in terms of having access to original text versus translated text and how you get to experience those things genuinely for yourself. I love the way you tied that to even that question of who are we, and seeing how that sort of threaded through your life from childhood all the way through, your professional years. So take us to those years. Age 10, you moved to England. That must have been I would assume a big change, moving from your town in India to London. Sounds like it was a kind of a dramatic change, although you may have been prepared for it in some ways. But tell us what happened from there.
Yeah, I don't think I was a child who resisted adventure. I was not one of those kids. I loved wherever I was put. I became very adaptable, mainly because of my mother fell sick when I was 5, and even prior to that, and so we had to be separated, and so I went to live with my one aunt, and then another one, and then my grandfather, and so it kind of shaped me in a sense where I became adaptable to
I can
circumstances, and moving wasn't wasn't something that was a traumatic experience for me. What was traumatic, I suppose, would be the separations that came with I was very attached. I was very affectionate, attached sort of a child. I was a very affectionate child, so I became attached to people very quickly. And but then again, when we moved to London, we had a whole family here. Uncles, aunts, because many of them had come from Uganda when Idi Amin threw them out in 1972. And so, they came here overnight, having to leave their lives where they had businesses, coffee plantations, and homes, like houses, property. And they were allowed to take, I think it was £10 sterling at the time, out in their pocket.
Wow.
And something like that, maybe $50. I don't know, but very little, compared to what they'd accumulate, they'd been working towards. So, but they were here, and they'd already been here 3 years, so they were settled, and they were starting to, get back a new life and so on, get into a new life rather. So that was, I found London absolutely fascinating. I felt, I don't know, a sense of freedom, in a sense, like openness. There's this, just a vibe. It's not something I can put my finger on, but there was this vibe of things happening. It was just moving forward. There was a sense of moving forward. Something was always being forwarded. So, and they were learning years. I mean, I was at school. So as I said, the first 6 months were a little bit traumatic, because when I came from India, we never spoke English in the school, although I always got the top grades in my English and other things. But because we were Indian children, we spoke in Hindi or whatever, Gujarati or whatever, and mostly Hindi, actually. And when I came here, I found that my tongue did not move in a fluid way with English words, even though grammatically I would get the top marks even against English kids in school. Grammar, I was 2 years ahead of my time. But spoken English, my God, I didn't understand a word. It was like, it was just a jumble of funny sounds. And the weirdest thing was, it actually made me giggle, because the sounds were so alien, and they were funny. And so I had the first 6 months of school where, I tried to communicate with people, and it just went badly. But that didn't take me more than 6 months, though, to actually start to get into the rhythm of it.
Yeah.
But that's why, for me, language, I never take it for granted.
Yeah, I can hear that loud and clear. And I know up through today, you talked about 3 languages from a very young age, and then adding 2 more after you arrived in London. And I believe even since then, you've added more languages.
Yeah, I happened to get married to a Belgian man who actually speaks English, French, and Flemish or Dutch very, very well. So, but because I went to University of London here for a little bit, wanting to pick up Dutch, because nobody was teaching Flemish in London. So I had to go with the Dutch version, which is, so Flemish and Dutch are, Flemish is an older version of Dutch, which is what's spoken in part of Belgium.
Right.
It's the main language of Belgium. Well, of course, the Walloons will say that it's French, but so then we have that dual language thing. But yeah, so I did start to learn. I must admit, I've been a little bit, but I can get by. I can order a coffee and, in a cafe and so on. If I wanted to spend a month or 2 committedly, I would definitely get that fluid. Yeah. And Sanskrit is the other one, which is an ongoing. Of course, nobody speaks Sanskrit today. But it is it's a language that's still alive in the text, and we must learn it in the sense of, as a yoga, as an avid yogi, I like to call myself. I like to think, a lot of and a lot of the study that I do of philosophy happens to come from India. Not just India, but there's a lot of it from there, because it's so rich. And there, my Sanskrit has become so much more active. Because the Hindi and Gujarati are, like, I would say probably 80% Sanskrit, but then they become, dialectalized, and so they do change, meanings change, things change a lot, but the roots are very much there, and so that's where we are right now, Tammy.
Yeah. Well, let's go just back a step or two, because I know that you said, you spent many years in business traveling and had a whole life before the life that you have now in terms of your work. So how did that start out after going to university, and how did you evolve into what you're doing today? I think we'd love to hear about that.
I skipped university. I was so
okay. You
eager.
said something about University of London, so I thought...
here, that was when I went to do Dutch, yeah.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I'm sorry.
Yeah, University of Westminster, actually. Anyway, so yeah, actually what happened was, I had this drive in me, and I don't know where it came from. Maybe because both my parents were ill for so long, and I was determined to get out and to really succeed in the world. I felt like I absolutely had to go ahead and do that. And from a very young age, I started working, on Saturdays and then holidays, in clothes shops and shoe shops. And before I even had an opportunity to apply for university, like when I was studying what we have here, A-levels, I was working, holidays in these shops. And then they gave me responsibility for, running shops. And I decided while I was applying for university, because I took a year off, I traveled for 6 months. And then when I came back, I thought I would actually, I would choose one of the things I'd applied for at university and go and do it, law or psychology or English. And, there were other things I was considering at the time. So I got this opportunity to manage a shop with about 15 staff.
Oh, wow.
I was still only 18, 19. And, we were turning over like hundreds of thousands of pounds per year in that shop. And so I thought I would just get the management training because that was on offer. And before I knew it, I got slotted into actually running one of those permanently for a while. And over the course of a year, I realized that this was just too small a game for me. I needed something more challenging. And so at that point, I decided that I was just going to go for, I wasn't going to go to university yet. Maybe I will go a year later or something. I was really enjoying the whole thing. And at that point, I found myself a job in a corporate.
Oh.
And in sales, funny enough. And they gave me the most incredible sales training. They had the top sales training program going. And, I never looked back since. That's kind of launched my career in management, business development. And that's how I ended up getting. So I very quickly, again, year on year on year, I found that the roles got smaller and smaller, and I was looking for bigger challenges. And before I knew it, I was in India, another sabbatical, I think it was maybe 9 years later or something. I decided to have a break, and I was traveling around India, and I heard about something called the offshore Indian IT industry, and I didn't know what that was. Just little rumors while I was in Delhi traveling around. And I read little snippets in newspapers, but I couldn't find anybody who could tell me any more about it. And this was the days before Google and before any of those things. So when I came back to London, I set out looking, in papers, advertisements on Sunday newspapers and so on, to see if I could find any mention of it. And I did. And there were only two companies at the time that had any offering in that area. And one of them was one of the largest companies going on the planet, and that's Tata Consultancy Services. And then the other was a smaller company, a startup, more or less, and they were advertising. But and I was still very young. They wanted like a track record of software sales for 5 years. I didn't have it, but I had other track records. Yeah. So basically, I hustled them, and I would not relent. I was relentless. 6 months, I hustled them, and I ended up getting the job against those people that did have those track records, and that totally changed my destiny.
Wow.
Because even though I had no background in that technology, I'd always been at the leading edge of technology in the work that I was doing, and got myself a reputation along the way of being somebody who can open doors that other people can't. And so that kind of became my cachet, to get that ask whenever I was pitching for a job. and the deals just got bigger and bigger, and the clients got bigger. We went into more and more complex technologies by the time we were in the year 2000 and so on. And usually my clients, for some reason or another, ended up being hardcore banks or financial institutions. So I ended up working in the City of London with some of those investment banks, with retail banks, corporate banks, insurance companies, the largest of them going. And and then develop business. And also because I had a background in telcos, like, Vodafone and so on. So then as technology was becoming so much more complex, that was part of the job, was to actually understand what was happening with the client, what was happening in the marketplace, where the market was going, what the competition was doing, and what issues the clients, were facing internally with their technology and with their business acquisition. So all of those things needed to be combined, understood, and then wrapped up in a solution, which were very, tailor-made, bespoke solutions to clients. And so it goes hand in hand. That there are some people who are very good at bringing in business. Other people are good at managing relationships. And I did both really well. And I wouldn't accept a role which was just one or the other. So I ended up with roles like that, and it was actually really fascinating. It shaped. In terms of, we're talking about emotional intelligence, communication skills, understanding business, understanding people's psychology, and dynamics, people dynamics, group dynamics, organizational dynamics, and market dynamics. So it was really a fascinating, growth path that I didn't even realize it took 15 years, just 25 years went just like that.
Just like that. I love that. And it sounds like you had this sort of eagerness to learn what you needed to know, combined with a way of connecting with people, tuning into them, and being able to match what you were learning about, if you had to learn about the software or whatever it was along the way, and understanding what people's needs were and what the market pressures were on them, or internal pressures, and really able to address that with them and align with them in that way.
Yeah, and absolutely, that's exactly right, Tammy. So, the understanding dynamics are all different, the various facets of the dynamics that are involved when you're talking about business deals that are anything from $10 million to 50 to 100, 150, 200, 300. They just get more and more complex.
Yeah.
And it's not easy because, I usually found myself being one of the only women in the field, even till very recently.
Yeah.
And so there were multiple, elements to learn. And I found that, there were things that I did really well and other things that I had no problem bringing experts in, to work in my team. So one of the things that, one had to do was to make sure that you have a good reputation, people want to work with you. And so even though I didn't have a degree, almost everybody that I worked with either had 2 degrees, at least an MBA, plus a technology degree of some kind, or engineering or something like that, or a business degree, and then, or a PhD as well. And so maybe 3 degrees, maybe 4 of them. That was the kind of that's what it took to understand the client. But I've always worked with those sort of people, regardless of the fact that I didn't. I don't know whether it's, some people have the ability just to soak up information, knowledge, and and it's not it never helped me. I think I got my MBA along the way.
Yes. I really appreciate what you're speaking to here, because I think sometimes people, they hang their hat, so to speak, on getting a degree as if that is the thing that's going to open the door to their success. And to me, getting a degree is great. And there's so much you really do need to learn on the job in order to really find your way. And it sounds like not having a degree doesn't sound like it was ever an obstacle for you. I know a lot of people worry about that, but it sounds like you were able to show up and do what you were really great at and what you enjoyed. And I think that's the other part of the equation here is you weren't just good at it. You clearly were embracing the whole thing.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you have when you have a degree, I mean, I'm not saying that if I had a degree it would have held me back or anything. And sometimes I hear people say that, oh, the degree that I have is useless or whatever. I don't say that at all. I think it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody.
Right.
To not have a degree and to do what we
Right.
Because a lot of people need it. They need that discipline. They need the structure of learning. I somehow just swam in it. And I'm not saying, look, there were times when, colleagues of mine were shocked that I didn't know I didn't know about a particular word or I didn't know how to spell it and I spelled it the wrong way. I didn't care.
Yeah.
That was not going to define the people tried to define you through that, right? That was never going to define me. And I didn't care that they had that criticism. I learned from that because all that did was it made me go and learn it offline, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't say that everybody should follow that path. And I do believe we're in a where people think they don't need a degree, they can skip it. If I had children, I would say no. Get it. Go to Harvard, go to Yale, go to Oxford, go and get that degree. It's really, really, it will really shape you. At least it will give you some friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there's good reasons to go through that or to have that experience. Absolutely. And yet, I think what we're pointing to here is it's not necessarily for everyone, and there still are pathways to success and fulfillment in your professional life with or without that. It's not, and I tend to always look for things that don't put us in a box, so to speak. It's not an all or nothing. And you're offering a very robust example of how you navigated and moved through your career at least in your corporate career, in a way that you used different strengths that you had to get there. And it's not that you went without any training or education either, because you said right at the outset that one of the first roles you had some fantastic sales training. So, there's all kinds of ways to get educated to be able to, take those next steps. So at some point, though, you decided to start your own business. I'm curious how that evolved and how that occurred.
Thank you. I actually, just to complete on the previous point,
Sure.
I think we're in a world. Anybody that wants to rise anywhere, go anywhere, we have to be in a continuous learning and personal development.
Yes,
professional and personal development scenario. We have to embrace that. Otherwise, we do get left behind. Because it's all about skill and instinct and honing the two so that you can listen to your inner voice, your intuition.
Yes.
But you also need to have the skill to talk to people, say in a C-suite. That's you need to know what not to do. You need to know how to address people, let's say a CEO in a German corporate as opposed to a CEO in a Japanese corporate. They're very different.
Yes.
So we have to know what the differences are and so on. So there's always learning going on. Right. So how did I make that move? Well, I think to keep my sanity all along. And also because I did have a lot of trauma growing up. I very early on went into learning about human mind and psychology, and it was a real kind of, I was galvanized to that material. And as I left home when I was 21, I bought my own place. I ended up, moving out, which was a whole other story for an Indian girl in the 80s in London. It wasn't allowed. But okay, having done that, what came up in my quieter moments at home in my own flat was a lot of emotion, a lot of raw stuff that needed to be looked at and processed. And so very early on, I read a lot, I learned a lot. I went to little groups or events where people had ideas about how to deal with these things, because we didn't have coaches in those days. We didn't have we didn't have Google, we didn't have online courses, we didn't have any things. I didn't have any mentors. So I literally was looking for anything I could find, like a sponge, and just soak it up. And so I ended up in a very powerful various powerful personal development programs and leadership programs that then I alongside of my corporate career trained to lead as well, and to coach but not before I had deeply worked on my own stuff through whether it's personal development, whether it's emotional intelligence, whether it's spiritual exploration. I've even gone so crazy into past lives to find my answers. And I have found the most incredible threads that just went, eureka, this makes sense. That's why I wrote these three books. We have the story runs more on that side. And so by the time there came a point at which I was craving to write, and I met my now husband. We're married 16 years, and he at the time said to me, very early on in our relationship, he says, "Why don't you just do it now? Because if you do it now, then you may just take a year and you can go back to work if you want to, and see what happens." So I just thought, I've never actually relied on somebody else to support me.
Yeah.
And it was a really big step.
Sure.
And for a year I would do it. And my God, it's just been a journey of its own. So I had qualifications along the way, which qualified me to coach, which qualified me to work with people, lead programs for transformation, lead to large groups, 500 plus at a time. And so it just made sense at the point when I was writing my books. I thought it was going to be a year. It took me much longer because, I spent 2 years in the British Library just researching stuff, to validate my experiences, to see whether what I experienced was anywhere talked about anywhere else. Or was it just something that, my crazy imagination? So I needed that validation. And along the way, I learned a lot about Indian non-duality, thought on non-duality, consciousness, the various systems that have gone from some of the incredible thought leaders that we've had through the ages. And then eventually I found my voice, because that wasn't quite happening easily. I was used to writing business proposals. I was used to writing a journal.
Right.
But writing for an audience who can relate for themselves through your experience and can really get engaged in the stories as if it's their story. Yeah. That's a skill. That is a special skill. And that's something that emerged as, and I had a lot of tears, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears before it actually started to flow.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you. So it sounds like the sort of jumping off point, so to speak. I mean, I know it took time to make these decisions. It wasn't just one day you were at your job and the next day you were, jumping off, whatever. It sounds like that your writing was really the first thing that you really took a deeper dive into, and then there were other things that came along over time where you started working with groups, doing transformational work. You're teaching yoga as well, and
that I do now. Yeah, actually,
right.
no, it came the other way around, Tammy.
Oh, tell me.
I started working with groups way before, alongside of my corporate career. So while I had my day job, which was already very intense, I happened to be single at the time, and I basically threw myself into leading programs as well, and we just had to make it work around my schedule. But
okay.
yeah, and I, prior to that, done a lot of seeking in India, in Bali, in Hawaii, many schools of thought, a lot of personal deep work, a huge amount of deep work internally, because I don't believe I could have done this otherwise.
Yeah. No, I understand. So it sounds like you did a whole variety of programs, experiences, to also, it sounds like, sort of unpack your own situation, and it was out of this curiosity of about other people as well. It was like you were curious about yourself, curious about other people. How did it all fit together, and where to take that going forward? When your husband suggested that you take that, big step and allow yourself to be a little more dependent at that time, did you have a vision of where you were going to take all of this? Or, I realize it probably looks very different today than it did when you started it, but I'm curious what your vision was and how that took shape over time.
So the vision came from a very young age, a young age of 7, actually. I literally, there's a moment in the book I talk about something happened with my mom, and I literally had a moment when I had this incredible traumatic event. And then through that, I sat in front of our home shrine, which is, we have a home shrine in Indian homes, which we are every day at, morning and evening. And I cried in front of the shrine, and I said, this cannot be happening. This is not real. You, God, cannot exist. And, if you allow these sort of things to happen. And in that moment, I had this incredible, I would call it an epiphany. I had an experience. It was very, very psychosomatic. It was spiritual, where I literally heard a voice, and the voice said to me, you have a purpose. You are well taken care of. You have a purpose. And it was just something that landed inside of me. And I still, to this day, it's a purpose that I am very clear about in terms of the bigger picture. I still don't have all the fruits in the basket. The context is the basket, and the fruits and the content. My learning in this life, the overall context is truly to be a medium or a facilitator, or somehow a person who inspires, but more of a catalyst who causes, an opening in other people to connect to the essence of who they are. That is a very clear purpose for me. So that's everything I do is around that. Now, in terms of the content, I am not allowed to see further than the next thing. I'm not, every time I have this vision, occasionally I see something. So I don't know where it's going to land up. It may never go anywhere further than we are now.
Yeah.
And that's part of my soul journey, is to really learn that to do what you do at the absolute utmost excellence capacity that you can offer, without being hooked on what the rewards are going to be.
Yeah. I call that without being attached to the outcome, and just doing the best you can, and knowing that whatever outcome occurs or whatever results happen along the way, you learn from those as well.
So it's a very deep lesson. One of the key lessons of the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna teaches Arjuna, the warrior on the battlefield, about doing nishkam karma, but that is to do your work. You do your work. You don't worry about the results. The results will take care of themselves. And so it's a very big and a deep lesson in humility. It's one of deep trust. I don't call it faith. I call it deep trust, and knowing that whether, it results in my being famous or, rich or whatever. And it may, who knows? And it may very well not, that what you do, the lesson is truly to give it your utmost. And as a yoga practitioner, I've been doing yoga since I was 12. I've been meditating since I was in my 20s. And, now I practice nearly 7 days a week, very, very, yoga to a very high standard. And every day I get on, and I teach, and every day I get on that mat, I don't know what will emerge. Yeah. Other than I stay connected to my breath and my commitment. Yeah. Stay present.
It's kind of exciting, actually, to have that way of being, because you never know what's going to show up. It's like, let's see what shows up on the mat today, And
but
yet
you get tested. But do you find you get tested sometimes when,
Of course. It's exciting, but excitement can also be, excitement doesn't always come in the form of surprise. We're having a party. It could be all kinds of things that you're just not expecting. Some people, though, allow themselves to be so afraid of the unexpected that they stay in a very narrow world. And I think something that I'm often encouraging people to do is to stay open and curious. And I would imagine that is a big piece of, it sounds like curiosity and openness has carried you from one thing to the next your entire life, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an innate propulsion. There's an innate, I don't like the word drive in the Western sense, but there is definitely something which is giving energy. There is something that's occurring within which keeps that vision going. And it's not a vision of like I have a vision board and I do affirmations. I don't do any of those anymore. I have a very deep spiritual practice. And I stay true to that, but I have I would say it's just an absolute surrender. To the process.
Yeah. So take us to what you're doing these days. You have a newsletter, you have a YouTube channel. I want the listeners to be able to follow what you're doing. And I believe that you also have a gift that you want to offer the audience.
Right. So I have on my website, it would be, so I do have a newsletter, and people can download gifts, and if they can also elect to receive the newsletter there. And the gift basically is around the fact that when, these books were written, I had this absolute dream of having a series of meditations, guided meditations that go with the books to deepen the journey and go with me. So if I'm swimming with wild dolphins off the coast of Hawaii, I have a meditation for that. If I'm meditating in the cave of an ancient sage, one of the 7 sages, who who's given us so much knowledge that we are today recycling all the time, off the Ganges in his cave, in his original cave, then I have a meditation called Meditating in Sage Vashishta's Cave. and so on. So there are, and and cleansing your karma in the Ganges, and I have so many meditations.
Wow.
So one of them is part of the gift, 3 chapters from the book, 3 chapter extracts from each of the 3 books. And then I just out of pure joy of doing it, I've created a lot of meditation mandalas, so people can download the gifts. And if they do go ahead and read the books through Amazon or Audible digitally, they get in touch with me, I will be more than happy for them to get other gifts.
So they can go to Amazon and look for your books. Is there another resource where they can try to reach out and learn more about your work?
Right. So the books, just to complete on the books there, Tammy, they're also available in a package on my website.
Oh, okay.
Special. So it's not anywhere else available.
Okay.
But if they wanted to get digital books locally, and they still want to avail of the meditations, I can help them out with that. YouTube channel, I'm developing that once again. I started in 2011, then I kind of stopped for a while. Now I started again. I'm on Instagram. Smita,
great.
These are the most, and I'm on Facebook as well. I have a page on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, we will include all of those links in the show notes so people can learn more about your work and how they might benefit from all that you have to offer.
Thank you so much.
Knowing that you've made a number of transitions, you've had quite the journey so far. What would be a key piece of advice that you might give somebody who's considering their own transition or thinking about what's next for themselves?
I would say the very first thing, really listen to your deeper calling, your deeper voice, the inner voice, and trust it. If it, there are junctures in our life where even though it looks like you have a choice, you actually don't have a choice. You can only go in that direction if you're going to go towards your growth. And what I would say is that, it's also really important for people to, you can't be creative. You can't build a business if you don't have, sufficient sort of resource. You've got to take care of the resources you need to be able to make the transition. A lot of people today are saying, just do it. I think that's fine if you're in your 20s. I think maybe in your 30s, not so much, depending on what your aspirations are. And then 40s and 50s. Yeah. I mean, calculated risks.
Yeah. I think as we get older, there's that practical side to things, but we shouldn't let that completely stop us. We just need to take those things into account as we continue to listen to that deeper voice.
Right. And I think one of the most important things is that start early listening to your callings, your passions, because if you develop that alongside of whatever you're doing, but we have it like I have to throw everything, I have to ditch everything that I've worked so hard for so that I can do this other thing. But why?
Yes.
Develop it alongside?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because I think too often people do think that they have to throw everything out that they've done so far, when in fact that actually makes all the difference in the world in terms of how they're able to navigate those next steps, because they have that experience to bounce off of and can use a lot of that experience to help them go forward.
Yeah, and develop the skills that will take you into what you're going to do, and really explore, work on honing those skills that you need in that other area. You just throw yourself in thinking, I want to write a book, and you actually have no aptitude for that.
Right.
or writer, you want to write a fiction, and that's just not where you're it's just not authentically going to flow for you there. You may write some other thing, you may write newsletters for people, I don't know. But it just is that really listening and developing the skills that you're going to need on that other journey, well alongside of what you're doing now, so you can actually bring that with you. And then there's a fading out of one thing and fading in of another, you know.
Yes. I really appreciate what you're saying about that. I think that ties in with the notion that it's not just an all or nothing. You don't just stop doing one thing to do another. You can really, stay from where you are and then keep blending in new learning until you're ready to really take perhaps a bigger step into something new. But it doesn't have to happen overnight. And it doesn't for most of us, right?
Right. I mean, I think that's something that you talk about in your book, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
From the inside.
Yes. I mean, everything you're saying, I almost feel like saying, yes, I could have paid you to say all these things because it's totally aligned with what I say in my book. I think you and I have, some different backgrounds that we bring to this, but philosophically, we are completely aligned. And I really appreciate you being here today. And this is fascinating. I wish you all the best going forward, even though we don't know where that will go. And who knows? But thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tammy. I really appreciate you having me on your show.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Smita Joshi. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her early life, transitions, and current work. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you're interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 228. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or you can place a request through your local public library. If you were inspired by this episode with Smita, please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find. Just go to my website, tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Click on the Apple Podcasts button and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help support the podcast by buying me a cup of coffee. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is noticed and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.